What's up, guys? Wasn't necessarily planning on making a video today, but we have a trade deadline coming tomorrow, so may as well. I mean, there's been some buzz around this team that we may be buyers on this trade deadline. Apparently, John Snyder, he's burning up the phone lines trying to make a deal, and I'll say this, obviously in the NFL, trades very rarely happen, especially player for player. I mean, basketball, baseball, you see it all the time, but when you're talking about the NFL, it is so hard to find a match. If you want to get a player, if you want to dump a player, it's just hard to find the right team that will be willing to take whatever you're offering. So, more than likely, nothing's going to happen, and this video is just going to be me talking about more or less what might happen this off season rather than this trade deadline. But we have, I think, 18 hours before the deadline hits, so let's talk about it. You know, it made me laugh today. I saw this yesterday, and this has probably changed by now, but it was announced that the Seahawks were contemplating trading one of their young depth receivers for offensive line help. And the name that was most associated with that was Chris Matthews. So, that took me back, man. And when I say that, what I mean is it took me back to when I was playing on Madden 2005, 8, 9 years ago. 2005 was my OG Madden game. And, in that game, if you knew what you were doing, you could trick the computer into making the world's stupidest trades. You could get all pros for backup wide receivers. You could get elite linebackers for backup offensive linemen. You could trade your backup quarterback and get 8 draft picks, or maybe not 8, but you could get a lot of draft picks. And it just made me think about that, and that brought a smile to my face. But it also kind of made me laugh because who the hell is trading for Chris Matthews? If we can get any kind of value out of that guy, I might have to send a nice $300 bottle of wine to John Snyder, because he'll be a true wizard then. So that kind of made me laugh. I mean, and some people and some fans I saw were actually taking it kind of seriously. Chris Matthews, he's tall and he has pretty good hands. He's had one good game in his career. It was in the Super Bowl. It was on the biggest stage possible. He had a great game in the biggest game possible, but one good game, and he has some special teams value. Yo, forgive me if I don't exactly expect us to get a game-changing offensive lineman out of that. But let's talk this through. Let's talk this trade deadline through, because now, when I hear that John Snyder's burning up the phone lines, I don't necessarily think that means that he doesn't like our team. I think he's doing his job. I think any general manager, it doesn't matter how good your team is, it doesn't matter how bad your team is, you should be out there burning up that phone line on before the trade deadline, just to see if you can maybe get a steal, maybe you can pull an amazing deal out. Just go out there and try. You want to call every other team in the league and see what you can get. Offer up your crap, see if they're willing to give you something. Offer up your veterans if you're a losing team. Try to go get somebody if you're a winning team. Just, it doesn't necessarily mean that you dislike your team. However, at 4-4, the season is obviously still alive, but we're not necessarily where we wanted to be. So I wouldn't be amazed if we made a big push to try to get somebody, but people are talking about it on Twitter. People are talking about it on some of the Seahawks websites. Just not realistic. So here's what I see. The Chris Matthews thing, he is a young wide receiver with some potential to maybe be something in the NFL one day, but there are a million of those in the league. You can go into free agency at just about any time, go find a young wide receiver and say, hey, this guy can do this guy can do that. And you'll be like, okay, this guy has potential. There's no difference between one of those guys and Chris Matthews. Only difference is Chris Matthews actually has had one good game in his career, while a lot of those guys out there on the street have had none. So, and meanwhile, young offensive linemen that show a hint of promise are rare in this league right now. And if you're a winning team, if you're a losing team, if you're a mediocre team, if you have a young offensive lineman that shows any kind of promise whatsoever, you should hold on to that player like grim death. So I don't see anything there. We're not going to be able to trade him for a veteran because the veterans out there, I'm talking about those offensive linemen who are like 34 or 35 and they sign a 1-year deal for cheap. You're not going to be able to get one of those guys because those guys only sign with teams that expect to win and they're on 1-year deals. So it's not like the team is going to really want to get out from underneath that contract. And there's nothing there. You can't trade Chris Matthews for a guy making a lot of money because we're right up against the salary cap. As of right now, we are less than $1 million under the salary cap. So if we did trade Chris Matthews for something, it would have to be for somebody else who's very cheap. And there's nobody out there who is going to trade us a young, cheap, promising offensive lineman for Chris Matthews. So I see nothing there. So let's talk through what I do see. On this roster, the players who I think we could trade to get value, where it actually makes sense. I see 2 guys on this team who I could see being traded. Some people are going to say Bruce Irvin because he's going to walk in free agency this offseason. I'd rather have Bruce Irvin's last half of his season over whatever we could get for him. I will take Bruce Irvin for the next 8 games plus the playoffs over anything we could get for him, even if he walks after 8 games plus the playoffs. You can't trade your secondary depth at this point because we just lost Ricardo Lockhead. That hurts our special teams. So, guys like Deshaun Sneed, who's been playing pretty well and, might have a little bit of value just because he's played so well this season. You can't trade him because you need him around. You can't trade Marcus Burley because you don't know what you're going to get with Jeremy Lane when he comes back. You can't trade you can't trade anybody in that secondary really just because you don't know what you're going to get from some of these guys. So I see it from 2 guys right now. One, Jermaine Kearse. Jermaine Kearse, we all love him. If you're a Seahawks fan, you love what he's done for this team over the past couple years. He's made big plays in big games. Russell Wilson trusts that guy. He goes up and catches those 50-50 balls like nobody else in this offense. Eventually, Jimmy Graham will be doing that, but for the time being, Jermaine Kearse, Wilson trusts that guy, but he is not a particularly good player. I'm sorry. Don't be emotional about this. Jermaine Kearse, he's okay. He's a serviceable starting receiver in the NFL, but only because we have Jimmy Graham and Marshawn Lynch. If you put Jermaine Kearse as the number 2 wideout on a team that didn't have a great running back and a great tight end, it would be a bigger problem than it is. Some days, Jermaine Kearse is great. Other days, he's invisible. You can go back and look at the game logs this season. There are some games where he does nothing. And then there are some games where he shows up big. You can't count on the guy. But his value might be inflated because he makes big plays in big games. Maybe somebody out there is going to look at him and go, oh, this is the guy who caught the game-winning touchdown in 2 straight NFC Championship games. Hey, this guy caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl against Denver where he broke four tackles. This is the guy who made that amazing catch in the Super Bowl against the Patriots that almost set up the game-winning score. Oh, this is the guy who caught the 63-yard touchdown in the divisional round. He made big plays in big games over and over. Maybe somebody out there is going to see that and think he's better than he is. But he's not making that much money this year. He's making maybe a little more than he should. He's making a couple million this year. He's on that, second round tender or whatever it is. So maybe there's something you can do there. But if you do this, you're saying, okay, you're clearing the way for Tyler Lockett because Tyler Lockett is clearly a better receiver than Jermaine Kearse. The only reason why Tyler Lockett isn't starting over Jermaine Kearse is one, so Lockett can play more special teams, and two, because Kearse knows, I think, has more familiarity with the offense and Russell Wilson than Lockett does, because Lockett just got here. So basically, this trade would accelerate the process of getting Lockett in the starting lineup across from Doug Baldwin. You would put um, Paul Richardson in the slot, I guess, and then Chris Matthews would be your number 4, and BJ Daniels would probably be your number 5. So you are crossing your fingers and hoping to God that nobody else gets hurt, because then you're in trouble, because then you're actually counting on BJ Daniels to play significant snaps as the wide receiver, and I don't want any part of that. Actually, BJ Daniels is on our practice squad right now, so you'd have to even bring him up. But if anybody gets hurt, you're in trouble. So with the Ricardo Lockett injury, because all this stuff about us possibly trading a wide receiver was before the Lockett injury, I feel like that puts the kibosh on that. We need Chris Matthews because of his special teams value with Lockett out for the rest of the season, and we need Kearse playing wide receiver with Lockett out for the rest of the season. So I don't think either of those are likely, but Kearse was one of the guys I thought was a potential trade piece. The only other guy on this team who I think we might trade who has any value at all is Luke Wilson. We have our starting tight end for the next couple years in Jimmy Graham, and he's a beast. I know maybe some people are saying he's not producing as much as he should. He's producing fine as far as I'm concerned. Jimmy Graham has played great so far this season. Luke Wilson, he's a quality tight end. He played good last year when he was forced into the starting role. He's done good things as the backup. He's got tremendous speed. He runs great routes. His hands are much better this year than they were last year, which is a sight. We could promote Cooper Helfett to back up to second string and sign, tight end off the street, or, move a fullback to play third string tight end. Luke Wilson might have some value out there for somebody. A team like, I don't know, the Packers, who their tight end is Richard Rodgers. A team like, basically any team that just could use a little bit of tight end help. There are quite a few out there. I want Luke Wilson to stay around. He's cheap. He's still on his rookie contract, and that's actually part of the problem. He's not making any real money. So whoever you trade him for, you have to get back somebody who's also on his rookie contract and is making practically no money. And if that's the case, they're probably not worth your time to trade, or the other team isn't going to be willing to trade them. So we just don't have a lot of chips, guys. I mean, the only way you could get something of substance by trading a Jermaine Kearse or a Luke Wilson or a Chris Matthews is if the other guy is overpaid and the other team just wants to get rid of him. And we can't do that because we don't have the cap room to absorb that cap hit. So I know there's going to be some buzz around the trade deadline tomorrow, whether or not we're going to do something, but I see it as a bunch of noise. The only thing I could see happening, if you want to go after one of the big offensive linemen who could really help the team this year, I'm talking Joe Thomas and Alex Mack, although Alex Mack has already said he's not going to accept any trades, so he's probably out. And then you have Joe Staley and Alex Boone from the 49ers. If you want one of those three guys, you're going to have to do a blockbuster. And basically, you would need one of those two teams to be willing to take back Russell Okung. Like, the Browns trade us Joe Thomas, and we trade them Russell Okung and some draft picks. I mean, that would actually work financially, but I'm not sure why the Browns would do it, except that Okung expires at the end of this year. He has some value in that regard, but I just don't think it's realistic. Okung is coming off of a minor ankle injury anyway, so I don't know if he'd be able to pass a physical. And even if he did, injuries have clearly sapped Okung a part of his effectiveness. So it doesn't make much sense for the Browns to do that unless they can get a first-round pick or something. And I don't want to trade our first-round pick this year. That's another thing. Not only can we kind of not use our draft picks to trade this year for a player because of the salary cap, I want to have our first-round pick this year. I don't know where it's going to be. It could be in the mid-20s. It could be in the late teens. It could be I mean, this team has not totally proven that they're a good team this year. I want to have my first round pick this year is all. So yeah, a lot of talk over not really much to say. Only way I see anything happening is if somebody on this team says, I'm going to take a pay cut or I'm going to move some money. And the guys on this team who could do that are like Jimmy Graham, Marshawn Lynch, and Lynch isn't going to do it. He just got his contract extension. Cliff Averill, KJ Wright, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas. I mean, it can't be Michael Bennett or Cam Chancellor because they want more money as it is. It can't be Russell Wilson or Bobby Wagner or Marshawn Lynch because they all just got their new contracts. And you can't move money with Russell Okung because he's a free agent next year. So, yeah, I just don't see much here, guys. So that's how I'm looking at things right now. The only other thing you could want on this team besides more offensive line help would be a number one wide receiver. I mean, if you could get a big time number one wide receiver, Doug Baldwin could move to the slot, and Jermaine Kearse would still work as the number two. Tyler Lockett would become more of a deep threat, but hey, you could get Golden Tate back. I say that as a joke, but it actually does make a little bit of sense. I mean, Detroit sucks. Golden Tate's not happy there. But again, he's making $6 million this year, so there's really not much you can do. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting day tomorrow with probably not much payoff. The Vernon Davis trade today, which announces that the 49ers are punting on the season pretty much. That's probably the most exciting trade we're going to get. But I'm going to keep an eye on things. Maybe we'll spin something up for one of the big offensive linemen, but we're going to have to give up some serious shit to get some shit back. So, not counting on it. But see you guys later. I'm going to go check out the second half of this Panthers-Colts debacle of a football game. See ya.